And good morning. We are back and here on KFYO Mornings with Dave and Matt. And as promised, we have Congressman Jodey Arrington with us here in the studio, live and in color. Good morning, Congressman.
Beautiful West Texas sunrise this morning. Good to be with y'all in person. But more importantly, it's just good to be back home.
Always good to get back to reality where things are real, huh?
Yeah, it's it is good to be back to sanity in a place where people exercise common sense and good judgment, something that is very uncommon in our nation's capital these days, especially with the Nancy Pelosi-led House. I'm sure we'll have plenty of time to talk about some of the things coming out of that
I don't know if you got
sausage-making factory.
Listen to us any earlier, but I was just talking, and I have a sense, and I don't know if it's right or not. But what I hear is Trump just has one win after another. I mean, his China trip, and now he meets with the North Korean dictator in North Korea. First time ever a sitting president has done so. It's just the guy just keeps on winning, and it seems to me like he's got things going his direction right now. Now, the thing that has surprised me is hearing all of the Democrats, not all of them, but hearing so many prominent Democrats bemoaning the fact that they don't have a candidate to beat Trump.
Yeah, these are desperate times for the Democratic Party. They're lurching so far left, and they're so far out of the mainstream. Late-term, on-demand abortion, open borders. We've just learned now that their Medicare for All would include 11+ million illegal immigrants.
And they all raised their hand.
And that's right. They all raised their hand that night of the debate. But you know what else? They've raised their hand prior to that debate to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States of America. And that is to protect and defend the American people. That is the first job of the federal government, and that is not debatable. We can debate all kinds of expansionist roles for the government, but one thing is clear. Our number one job is to provide for the common defense. And by allowing more services and benefits to accrue to people who are here illegally, you're just inviting more people to come. And
which is what they want.
It's exactly what they want. I think it's abundantly clear. In fact, they're not even denying that anymore. Right. I mean, we are just it's hard to believe. You feel like you went to sleep and woke up in Venezuela, but it is absolutely mainstream now, this socialist big government ideology. It's never worked anywhere. But we have a president who has reduced the government's role in our lives and has provided more freedom in the marketplace and in our personal lives and more sovereignty to states. And what have we seen? We've seen the spirit of America lifted. We've seen the job creators making investments and expanding opportunities for Americans. We have the lowest unemployment in 50 years, lowest ever for Hispanic and African American. And when I hear this sort of diatribe by Bernie Sanders and the likes of Bernie Sanders about the downtrodden and about the war on poverty, we've spent $22 trillion on the war on poverty since the Great Society.
Lyndon Johnson, 1964.
And we've changed the poverty rate zero. The best anti-poverty program is still a job. And we've got more jobs and we have people to fill them thanks to free market pro-growth policies of this president and the last 115th Republican Congress. That's the direction we got to get back on.
We have to tell that story over and over and over.
That's right.
You have these young people that they weren't even alive when we had the Berlin Wall, when we had communism, true communism in Russia.
That's right.
And the Cold War. They don't even remember that. And Bernie's telling them all this BS about how we're going to have free college and we're going to have everything is free. Well, that's a bottomless pit. And no, it isn't free. Somebody has to pay for it.
It's worse. It's worse, Dave. It's the great lie. Medicare for All is $30 trillion. We're at $22 trillion in debt. By the way, I stopped calling it $22 trillion in debt. That's our national debt at this point. We're almost at $1 trillion in annual deficit spending. Yeah. I call that a deferred tax on our children and grandchildren. Somebody's going to pay that. That isn't just free money. So whether it's health care or education, there isn't anything for free. But Congress has enabled that entitlement mentality because we keep expanding government, and we do it without any pain. There's no increase in taxes. There's no cuts to your favorite programs. So we just keep borrowing, and we keep rocking along until the sovereign debt crisis happens. And I'm telling you, that's the biggest threat that this country faces.
So, Congressman, I can see only one fix with that, and I know that you're behind it. You've mentioned it before, but that's term limits. I mean, because if they are fighting for that next re-election, then they're never, ever going to do something that's going to fix the problem.
Matt, that's exactly right. It's just human nature. You get these folks into these political positions in Congress, and if they can stay forever, they'll stay, and they'll do the things that they need to do to stay in power, and that will be their number one objective, and it will infiltrate their decision-making process. And so we have a bunch of politicians that try to give as much as they can away to keep their jobs. So term limits is a big part of that. Now, states, almost every state in the union has a balanced budget mandate in their constitution or an added amendment, which basically means at the end of the day, their books have to balance. So they have to pay for the things they expand.
Well, they can't print money.
And they can't print money. They can't borrow from China like the United States can. So we need a balanced budget amendment. We need term limits so that we can honor what our founders intended, which is that citizen leaders and legislators serve and then come back and live under the rules that they passed. We'll see if that ever happens. The president endorsed my bipartisan term limit bill that I introduced last session. I think we're in that sort of drain the swamp environment. I think we get the president elected for the second term, get the House back, and I'm going to be demanding from my friends in leadership to tee those things up for a vote. The problem is 80% of the American people support term limits, but we never bring it to the House floor for a vote. We don't want to put anybody in a bad, in a bad position.
They don't want their name on a.
They don't want
that one.
Exactly. So I'm hoping that we get this House back. I have all the confidence the president will get reelected.
It seems like we're heading that direction, barring some catastrophe. But what are the real chances of getting the House back?
I think.
I mean, there's not.
It'd break from history to get the House back. The after losing it in the midterms to immediately get it back, it would be historic. But let me tell you why this is a different time. We have, and here's some data for you: 44 Democrats who won in the midterms won by 5% or less, very close win margin. And of those 44, 31 of them won in districts that Trump won. 31 Democrats won in seats that Trump won. And 13 of those Democrats won in seats that Trump won by more than 5%. You always have big headwinds in the midterm when you are the party in power in the White House. That's just the cyclical nature of elections. So I think with the big lurch to the left, with open borders, socialized medicine, all the things that we've talked about, one of only 7 countries that has sort of late-term abortions with North Korea and China and the likes of those countries. The list goes on. I think as you have a presidential primary, Democratic primary, where people are trying to out-radicalize the next, with those numbers and that backdrop, Dave, I think we've got a good shot at getting it back.
It is 7:17 this morning. Of course, we're talking here live in the studio with Congressman Jodey Arrington, and our text lines are open. If you have a question for the Congressman, 806-680-2790 is our text number. We'd love to hear from you. We'll take a quick break and be back with more after this. And 7:22 a.m., we're back with Congressman Jodey Arrington in our studio this morning. And Congressman, off mic, we were talking about the situation that we have down at the border. Of course, that's in the news every day, and the Democrats have been saying that this was a manufactured crisis, and now they're beginning to have to eat those words. So we're hearing here on the news. Is that accurate? And I know that you spent some time on the border recently, and I guess the question is it as bad as some are saying?
Well, it's a crisis, Dave, on two fronts. It's a security crisis because we have almost 5,000 people now a day coming across illegally. We've had over 100,000 people the last 3 months. We've had more people in 3 months than the last year in terms of illegal immigration, and those we've apprehended. We know we lose probably two to three to every one that we apprehend. And then you have the humanitarian crisis. First of all, it's a dangerous trek. We're encouraging people by our policies de facto to come here and risk their lives. And our policies, especially asylum policies and the Flores case, have created a situation where, and the word is out in Central America, if you come here and you bring a child as a passport, and that's what they're being used as pawns in this deal. So if you bring a child, you'll be released into the interior of our country. Most of them never show up for their deportation hearing. And
nine out
of 10 are ruled to not have legitimate asylum claims. So, why would they? So we have enabled and aided and abetted this major flow of illegal immigration. Now, I was in McAllen, which is the most active, the Rio Grande Valley sector of the border, which is the most active. They have over 1,000 people coming across a day. They are busting at the seams. It is an absolute meltdown. And Border Patrol agents are taking half of their time, not enforcing the law, not securing the border, which is what they were trained and hired to do, but providing humanitarian aid to these folks. And listen, you look
to keep
at
them from starving to death.
To keep them from starving to death. And I looked at these kids. I have 3 children of my own, and I just could not stop staring at this one little boy about my son's age. I have 3 children, and he was holding his brother. These were unaccompanied minors. That means their parents are nowhere to be found. And it breaks your heart, man. It breaks your heart. And I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat. Nobody finds that acceptable. Now, I'll tell you this. We are giving them shelter and food and medical care like they've never seen in their lives. I can tell you that. They're in better shape today than they were than they've ever been. But that's not the Border Patrol's role, A. B, we cannot sustain this. We have to do something to deter and get at the root causes, or we're going to be spending the $4.6 billion that we recently spent, which was emergency supplemental, which the Democrats fought us tooth and nail for 60 days because they don't want the president to get a win.
Right.
And instead of saying, let's do the humane thing, let's do the American thing, and while we detain people, let's treat them with dignity and respect until we determine their legal sort of status with respect to asylum and deport them. And we couldn't even get the Democrats to do that until we forced their hand.
So let me ask you this.
Let me ask one thing, Matt, while I was on my mind.
Yeah.
Clear up something for me. We heard and we have seen all the reporting, hours and hours of reporting about the gazillions of people marching. We've seen the herds of people marching toward the border. And it's not clear to me, have all of those people come across the border to the
Not
United
all
States?
of them. No, some of them are in Mexico. In Mexico, as you recall, the president threatened tariffs, and people were, all feathers were ruffled and concerned about the president using one of the few tools he has. I mean, he can't get Congress, and I will say this specifically, Democrats in Congress, to do anything about this. So he talks to Mexico and uses the lever of a tariff and gets 15,000 troops on their southern border because international law dictates that if you are seeking asylum, you are to stop in the first safe country, which would be Mexico.
But honestly, troops on the border, the only good they're going to do, from my understanding, is if they shoot somebody, and they're not going to do that.
No, but they
can't prevent them from walking across the border.
The Mexican officials, their military can work as border security. You're right. Ours are in support of Border Patrol agents. In fact, most of ours are doing humanitarian aid right now. That was part of the funding package. They didn't even want to pay, the Democrats, for the overtime that Border Patrol agents are working, that Texas Air National Guard and other folks in the military are doing to support Border Patrol agents.
Okay, we've got a lot more to talk about. You
I'm staying. Okay. I'm here until you guys kick me off.
All right, very good. We'll give Matt. I've been hogging it, so we'll give Matt a shot.
Your turn next, Matt.
Okay, Matt and Dave here on KFYO Mornings with Congressman Jodey Arrington, and we will take a quick break and be back with more. Text lines are open 806-680-2790 if you have a question for the Congressman. And we are back here on KFYO Mornings with Dave King and Matt Martin, along with Congressman Jodey Arrington live in our studio.
So let's jump over to the USMCA. Now, this is the trade agreement that Donald Trump has had his people working hard to get all the kinks worked out. Apparently, it looks like everything's worked out, and it's taking over NAFTA. I mean, people maybe more understand NAFTA, but a lot of people call it NAFTA 2.0 or whatever. But is Nancy Pelosi going to give Donald Trump that win?
She's going to be forced to, because it's so much better than NAFTA 1.0. The North American Free Trade Agreement has quadrupled, just to give folks, listeners, a perspective, has quadrupled from $10 billion to $40 billion the amount of ag product that we export to Canada and Mexico.
Hey, maybe they're going to pay for that wall after all.
Well, that's one way to pay for it, because this is money that's going to be taxed that will go to the United States Treasury. That's what happens when you expand your economy. You actually bring in more revenue, and you do it through growth. And so the independent agency, the International Trade Commission, has quantified the jobs impact of USMCA or NAFTA 2.0 to be 170+ thousand jobs, almost 70 billion in total economic impact. Texas alone is USMCA, or NAFTA rather, supports 1 million jobs. This is huge. This would build on the tax cuts and the regulatory reform that we've seen create a surge in economic growth here in the United States. This is better for our workers. It's better for manufacturers. It's better for our ag producers. And the Democrats, like Henry Cuellar in Laredo, the largest inland port, and the one who freshman congresswoman from Houston who beat John Culberson, they have to be for this. There's going to be tremendous pressure on Nancy Pelosi. This is going to be another Nancy Pelosi miscalculation, not because she's not smart enough to figure it out. It's because AOC and her radical left continue to just hound her and be a thorn in her side and cause her to do things that are politically not smart. She'll be forced to let these guys off the reservation and off the leash, because because of how much better it is, even from a labor perspective. And I'm not big on putting a bunch of labor policies into trade deals. I just want a fair and head-to-head competition. I don't want one group to play by a different set of rules than the United States workers. But labor has substantially improved. In fact, at a hearing, I asked union reps, is this better? And I asked them to go down the line, and they all said absolutely. They were singing Bob Lighthizer, the U.S. trade rep, the president's sort of chief negotiator. They were praising the president and Bob Lighthizer. And the last trade deal, NAFTA, had labor only as a sidecar. Labor is actually in the core of this agreement. So the president was smart. You know, he won the Rust Belt. He won the Midwest. He won the blue-collar workers and the union guys. I mean, not many Republicans have been able to do that. This president really resonates with them. He included that in his negotiations. I don't think there's any way they can penetrate this deal not being great for America, and I think it'll overwhelm Nancy Pelosi. Will get it, and America will be better off.
Okay. So what are some? I know that they had to update some stuff. And you know, you have China as well, but with Mexico and Canada, are there a lot of patent problems with electronics and stuff that needed to be updated as far as the USMCA?
Well, we did update our IP and e-commerce and a number of things that were modernized. So part of USMCA was modernizing NAFTA. Right. You know, we signed it in 1993. A lot has changed since then. And then some of it was increasing the standards like food safety standards. We also improved labor and environmental standards. For me, that means that we don't operate under a set of environmental labor regulations at tremendous disadvantage to Mexico. That's why you saw this surge in maquiladoras and other operations moving to Mexico. Well, we've evened that out so that there won't be this giant sucking sound from Mexico bringing all of our manufacturing operations to sort of border regions. I think if you ask the dairy guys, they'll tell you that we have they're going to increase their dairy product by the tune of $300+ million, or almost 50%, because they were being taxed going into Canada by about 200% tariffs. Meanwhile, our market was completely open to dairy products from Canada. So that sort of reciprocal dynamic within the trade deal with Canada, I could go on and on. This isn't perfect. There never is such thing as perfect in anything that we ratify or pass in Congress. This is so substantially better than USMCA. And when we get this passed, and this is why the sense of urgency is critical in terms of timing, this will be the framework we'll use for the Asia-Pacific region. Right now, the Japanese want American beef, but we're taxed like Canada was taxing our dairy products. Mm-hmm. Australia gets a much better deal. So now, since we did not do TPP, remember the discussions of TPP? Since we walked away from TPP, the other countries involved, including Europe and Australia and others, have worked out better deals. So we're falling behind and we're losing market share. We're 5% of the total world population. 95% of the market is outside of the United States. Mm-hmm. So we'll take this USMCA framework and we'll go and lay that over the relationships in Asia, in Europe, and other places, and it will be a much fairer, better, more reciprocal trade deal with those partners than it currently is.
So was walking away from the TPP a good thing?
It was, because it was a window dressing Obama deal. We'll get real trade agreements with this USMCA framework.
Very good. Okay, quick break here, and we'll be back with Congressman Jodey Arrington, who, by the way, is our congressman, if you guys hadn't figured that out.
Proudly so.
Probably. 7:42 a.m. here on KFYO Mornings with Matt and Dave. Back in a moment. And we are back here. KFYO Mornings with Dave and Matt and Congressman Jodey Arrington. We have some questions that we need to get to from our texters. We've been inviting those all morning at 806-680-2790. We said, texter says, where were you guys when the Republicans had control of the House? Stop worrying about re-election and fix the issues facing our country. That is leadership. And I guess that's more of a statement than it is a question.
Well, I'd love to comment on that.
Well, go right ahead.
Well, where were we? We were passing free market pro-growth tax reform, which we've seen historic growth as a result. Like we said, lowest unemployment. By the way, it's 30-year high job participation, and wages are growing faster than they have been in over a decade, and fastest among the low-income folks. So we were putting in policies with our president that have created opportunities now, more job opportunities than we have people to fill them. A. B, I was working on the VA committee where we were passing reform after reform to give veterans more choice over their health care, not stick them in the broken VA single payer, by the way, system, which is a harbinger of what would happen if we had socialized medicine for the entire country. It's shameful. We gave them, our veterans, a way out of that. It ended up being bipartisan, but it was after lots of resistance from Democrats. What else were we doing? We were rebuilding the military. We saw a 20% reduction in military investment in the Obama era. We had a bunch of idle threats to Syria. We were apologizing for American strength. And now the president, along with Republicans like myself, last Congress, put in the largest reinvestment of our military that we've seen in over a decade. We were making cuts while we were losing more troops in training than on the battlefield. So these are real things that are keeping our troops safe and successful and doing the first job, which is providing peace through American strength.
Okay.
Congressman, also, I just want to remind whoever this was that made that statement that the House was actually passing a lot of very conservative things that could not get through the 51-member
You were paying close attention, and you're right. The American Health Care Reform Act repealed Obamacare, put market-based, patient-centered reforms, and remember John McCain, Senator McCain, giving the thumbs down? One vote. Mm-hmm. So, look, I appreciate what he or she is saying. I get frustrated. It's hard to get things out of Congress, both sides. It's a difficult process. But we did a lot last legislative session.
Another question, the texter this morning says, question for the Congressman, why can we not use the military to secure our southern border?
I was calling for the military to participate in border security before the president. In fact, I talked about it in my campaign. I also encouraged the president before he declared it a national emergency to do so because I knew we couldn't get Democrats to support him in terms of all the border security efforts, including the wall and physical barriers. So I've been lockstep with this president, and I appreciate what the gentleman's saying. It's a national security imperative to secure your border. Section 4, Article 4 of the Constitution, it is the president's and our federal government's job to prevent an invasion, and that's what we're seeing.
Okay. Another texter says, budget deficit. I can't understand why the Congress does not see the horrific economic catastrophe that is so evident.
Couldn't agree more. I'm right on with that statement. I think the biggest long-term threat to this country, to my kids and the folks who are listening, kids and grandkids, is a sovereign debt crisis. We will spend more on interest, just the interest on the amount of money we borrow in 10 years than all we spend on national defense. Yeah. It is a crisis, and I'm going to spend whatever remaining time I have in Congress, and I don't plan on being there forever. I'm a term limit guy. I'm going to spend whatever remaining time to try to rein this in, because I think in the end, if you look at Roman Empire, Persian Empire, all the great societies, it wasn't an enemy from the outside. Right. It was what happened. It was the decay and the lack of restraint on the inside, and that's what's happening in this country.
So, Congressman, another thing with this is the question is, how do you fix it? I mean, the Democrats will not do anything about it when they're I guess you look at y'all pass the tax reform, and all of a sudden the Democrats are screaming about it, but when they have the president and they're in power, they're not going to do anything about it. How does the Republicans, when they get into power, do something about it?
Listen, to contrast the freedom in the marketplace that we've seen and the response from job creators and the response from consumers, by the way, consumer confidence all-time high, we're keeping more of our hard-earned money, which is the way it ought to be. It's not the federal government's money. Mm-hmm. Very different perspective from Republican to Democrat. Look at the Obama administration. Flat, stagnant, no wage growth, no income growth. There was a 2% annual GDP on average for 10 years. That's pathetic. Yep. So I think that we've proven, I think, that free market policies, which all it is get government out of our way and off our backs and watch the American people. What made America great? What made America great are the American people, we the people. So we're just trying to infuse a little we the people back into this country and into the system.
Okay. 7:52 a.m. here with Dave and Matt in the morning and Congressman Jodey Arrington, and we'll be back with more right after this. And we're back on KFYO Mornings with Matt and Dave and Congressman Jodey Arrington. We want to get right to this texter this morning who says, I know that Democrats certainly do not want Trump to succeed, but it almost seems like that a lot of Republicans in the House and Senate do not want him to succeed either. What's up with that?
Well, I think that the vast majority of Republicans in the House and probably the Senate absolutely want the president to succeed. I think the president has been a disruptor, and I think it's been good. He's trying to shake things up and drain the swamp. It is a tough culture, and it's a dysfunctional culture. And it's on both sides, by the way. And I think having this president, we can talk about his economic policies, foreign policies. We haven't talked about Iran. And with the latest with China, there's so much to cover, guys, and I appreciate y'all letting me come on. I think the best thing that this president has done is two things. One is he has worked tirelessly. I don't know where he gets his energy at his age. I mean,
I agree.
Seriously, I mean, but he's worked tirelessly to do what he said he would do in the campaign. He has set a new standard for politicians who say one thing on the campaign trail, and then they get up to Washington and they start equivocating and modifying based on, well, it's time to govern now, the campaign's over. This guy has been all in on what he promised he would do, and he's fighting every day to do it. The other thing is just shaking things up and remembering the forgotten man. Remember that speech that he gave on Inauguration Day? He said, it's about the forgotten man. I'll tell you, West Texas and rural America is part of that forgotten man. They feel like that the federal government has concentrated so much power that they feel a sense of tyranny of regulation and taxes and policy. So we need more freedom, and he's fighting for that freedom.
I've got you there. And listen, we're so glad that you came in, that you stopped by this morning. Always love to have you live in the studio.
Likewise. Go West Texas.
You betcha. It is time to take that 8 o'clock break here on KFYO Mornings with Matt and Dave, and we'll return with the final half hour right after this.